All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon. We'll start with Director Bradford.
Here.
Gallardo.
Here.
Gore.
Here.
Jennings.
Here.
Sander.
Here.
Stallard, absent. Thomas.
Here.
Vice Chair Zaragoza. Absent, and Chair Kennedy.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have an announcement to make before we do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Just a reminder that if you're not speaking, if you could please mute your device just for background noise. And the rest of you are pros at this, so that's all my announcements.
All right. Thank you. Then if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice and liberty for all. All right, on to the first item.
Our first item is a consent item, and also, sorry, backing up, we have no public communications. But our first item is a consent item, the remote committee meeting. And this is our standard item to allow this meeting to be held remotely.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion
Bradford will move to approve.
Look, we're all ready to do
from
it.
everybody. All right,
I think I caught Bradford, but sorry, I didn't know if there was a second.
I'll second it. Gore, sorry.
all right, please call the roll.
Thank you. Bradford,
Aye.
Gallardo,
Aye.
Gore,
Aye.
Jennings,
Yes.
Sander,
Aye.
Stallard, absent. Thomas,
Aye.
Vice Chair Zaragoza, absent, and Chair Kennedy.
Aye,
Motion carries.
thank you. Next item.
Next item is information item number 2, SACOG's 2023 work plan, opportunities and challenges in the year ahead. And I believe James is providing this presentation.
Indeed, I am. Good afternoon, and thank you, Lynette. If you could just pull up, just got a couple of quick slides here. Again, welcome to the Strategic Planning Committee and the year ahead. This first item really is to remind you of some of the larger work items that we have in the work plan coming up this calendar year. Casey did a relatively brief walk through that at the January 19th board meeting, if you remember. And so what we want to do today with all of you is just review some of those and talk a little bit about both the opportunities and the challenges ahead. I'm not going to go through all of the entire work plan and everything, but I did want to use this opportunity just to really give you all a chance to think a little bit in your head, the work that's coming, etc. So you can go to the next slide, Lynette. So, okay, just starting off on the right foot for the Strategic Planning Committee. The good news for the Strategic Planning Committee is you have a new strategic plan. And as you remember, we've spent quite a bit of time on that last year, along with the Racial Equity Action Plan. And to get into the practice, we have a vision statement for the first time ever, a vibrant and thriving Sacramento region for all. Next slide. We have a mission statement now. SACOG convenes and connects the region to advance an equitable, sustainable, and prosperous future. And as a reminder too, we have 4 priority areas underneath here that really get into sort of a lot of the substance of the what and what we work on, including the built environment, land use, transportation, reinvesting and revitalizing existing infrastructure. So, but just a reminder to us all, and then next slide. So this is where I'm just going to spend my time for the rest of this presentation. And I'm going to walk through a couple of these and would love to get any kind of, happy to get questions as I go, would love to get some discussions and thoughts and feedback. Again, you've heard this, you heard this from Casey walking through at the board meeting, because we were a little bit tight on time at that point in the January 19th board meeting. So this is a bit of a chance for you to step back and think a bit about the work ahead.
Okay, James, just for the members here, let's do this pretty informally. So just jump in, don't wait for me to acknowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just a reminder of practice, and some of you are new to the Strategic Planning Committee by way of your positions chairing committees this year. And I think you all know this. The Strategic Planning Committee is made up of all the former board chairs, former board leadership, and the current board leadership. So we, as an agency, we actually have what's called an overall work program, which is a very detailed, very long document in terms of our work for the year. We try to boil that down into a summary of the work program every year, beginning of every calendar year. We try to operate on that basis. And so here are really the highlights from the year ahead. And I'm starting at the top with, we have a new strategic plan. We don't want that to sit on a shelf, even a virtual shelf or the website. We want to figure out what can we and how can we operationalize the strategic plan and make sure that we are making good and actually being true to it. I'm gonna move on a little bit because I want to spend a bit of time in sort of the middle of this set of activities for the year ahead. You all know, and you've heard quite a bit by now about our upcoming long-range plan. We're calling that the blueprint. As a reminder, we are looking to extend the timeline of that blueprint to give ourselves some more time to do some engagement, to do a lot more of our equity-oriented engagement, our RAISE grant that we've won. The 2025 schedule, if you remember, allows us to sync up with the Bay Area and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. But it also, frankly, it gives us time this calendar year to do, I think, the very important, but also likely challenging work of trying to figure out what kind of a path are we on to the year 2050. We're extending the timeline of our long-range plan out now to 2050. And how does the sum of all of our transportation investments, our land use, our growth, and our development allow us to achieve all of our regional goals? And in particular, the one that we've obviously spent a lot of time talking about is the greenhouse gas reduction target of 19% by 2035. But it is not the only goal. There are some really other important goals in this blueprint plan. A reminder on the blueprint, we went out by actually the board's suggestion, and we think it was a great idea and a good use of time. We visited every single jurisdiction the last half of 2022. We gave you all a preview, and your fellow board members and council members a preview of the blueprint, and talked about some of the key project initiatives that we have going on. And we said, we will be back. We'll be back in your jurisdictions in 2023 to more deeply engage you and your residents and your constituents. We're indeed doing that. The first half of this calendar year, we'll be doing pop-up events all over the region. We're trying to schedule those now with your staff and with our partner organizations. And so in the coming month, you will begin to hear a lot more about these three kind of alternative pathways that we've been developing, these scenarios that the staff has been working on. The board will hear updates on that in March and in April. Again, we'll be going out to your communities in the spring through early summer. We have a regional event on June the 16th to convene the region and elected officials in particular to talk about the blueprint plan. So It is going to take it is already taking quite a bit of our time. It is one of the most important things we do as a region, as an agency. It is always challenging to translate a very complicated plan into into values and priorities and projects that people care about. But it's really going to take quite, I think, a bit of the engagement of the board this year. Should I keep going? Do you want to talk a little bit about the blueprint, or you want me to keep going through a couple of these others?
I should keep going.
So for number 3, you know, and I think on number 3, I would say on racial equity and community engagement, we do have a path forward on this, thanks to many of you. Thanks to Director Jennings, who not only chaired the board, but chaired the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group last year. Not only do we have the statement on racial equity, but we have a racial equity action plan. And as I mentioned that up top of the call, that racial equity action plan really nicely lays out our commitments, very measurable, very specific, very actionable. We will have a new Race Equity Inclusion Working Group this year with 10 board members who have stepped up to volunteer on that. And we're now putting together the public stakeholders for that group. It will be different because the task and the charge that you adopted in January will be different. It is all about implementing the Racial Equity Action Plan and doing that also in partnership with some of our partner agencies, some of our other governments around the region, right? So a different charge and a different focus. But I think the challenge on this, right, is going to be, even though we have a very specific racial equity action plan that we can follow, it isn't as if this is going to write itself or implement itself. This is still going to be challenging. The topic of race and racial disparities and tackling that is still a challenging conversation to have. And translating all of those things to actionable things that our agency and this board can take action on is also going to be part of the work this year. Remember, we have it in 3 buckets of operations, programs, and board practice. So I think we have to move now from sort of the general statements and the commitments really into operationalizing what racial equity and inclusion looks like in this agency's work. Okay. I'm going to take the next 2 together, and then I'm going to sort of pause. So transportation funding, as many of you, I know you know, because it's been a big topic. There's a lot of people who joined the SACOG board, I think, because they think of us as a transportation agency, and for good reason. We do the planning for transportation. We have funding for transportation by way of federal and state law over the last 3 decades that has devolved and pushed down significant amounts of transportation funding to the regional level. You know about and are taking action on, the midst of taking action. Transportation Committee last week just approved our plan for the corrective action that the Federal Highway Administration has given to the state that we are a part of, which means we now, as 6 counties and with our very important partners at PCTPA and EDCTC, are really bound together to develop a 6-county competitive call for projects for the transportation money that comes down to the region. That is going to be governed by a board working group. Again, people have stepped up and volunteered for that. We do have about 18 months to figure out this, but it really speaks to, I think, the importance, the challenge, but also the opportunity of approaching this at a 6-county level and doing this in partnership. We cannot guarantee any one county or any one jurisdiction, as you know by now, any kind of a minimum amount of formula money. Everything has to be competitive. But in so doing, I think we have to take what we have already been doing in the 4 counties as the RTPA transportation agency for the Yolo, Sutter, Yolo, and Sacramento counties, extended across the 6, include our partners in El Dorado and Placer, and try to figure out how we can incubate, develop, and award funding to projects that benefit urban, suburban, and rural areas across all 6 counties. And then the next piece, which is connected to this as well as number 5 on coordinating federal and state grant requests. We talked a little bit about this at the Policy Innovation Committee this morning. The corrective action, the 6 county transportation funding that used to be 4 plus El Dorado and Placer are now 6, including El Dorado and Placer, right? That is an important 7% of all of our long-range plan. The money that comes into the region to spend on transportation, 7% basically flows through the 6 counties. It has some level of authority for all of us. 93% comes from other sources. Some of those are local, but much of it is state and federal. And so number 5 and federal and state grant requests, as we have discussed in the last couple of years, there has never been more money available at the state level and now the federal level, much of it in a competitive nature. So we have to go and compete for these funds. And that's great. I mean, in many ways, we've wanted more federal and state funding to invest in our region. We have been preparing for that. We have been making the case that we are investment worthy and investment ready. But here lies a really big challenge that we have with these competitive grants. And let's just for a minute focus at the federal level. Any local partner, any local government, any transit district, any joint powers authority is able now to go directly to the feds and apply for a transportation grant, which again is great on the face of it. We've wanted that for a long time. However, it begs the question very quickly, what's our regional strategy to go after federal grants? Are we putting in competing grant applications? Are we aware even of all the applications that are going up to the federal level? Are we supporting one another? Do we have an overall strategy? And I'm going to give you the answer to that question is not really. We're doing our best. Again, we've never had this much money available. That's great. It's a good thing. I was just at a conference back in Washington, D.C. with all of our peer councils of governments across the country, and they're too struggling with this very issue. There was a very interesting moment at which the head of the Cleveland MPO, which is multi-county, stood up and said, we were so worried about this, we got together and we now have a strategy agreed upon that one application from our region goes into each program. We all support that application as a region. We rally behind it. We take turns. And I mean, many of us sort of had our jaws open and thought, wow, how did you accomplish that? And I know I'm not suggesting that'll be an easy thing to do, but I do think it speaks to this opportunity, I think, exposing the challenge we have of, while we have great projects and great programs, and I think a great story to tell in our region, we are not necessarily great at prioritizing and having a short list of things. I will say, even on as much as we're involved in the Cap to Cap trip, and I encourage you all to go to Cap to Cap and go lobby back in DC, right? We tend to have very long lists of things rather than say, here's the one thing we want, and we're all rallying behind that. And again, just to close on this and to get some discussion on it, I'm not suggesting that's an easy thing to do, because having one project that we all rally behind suggests, right, that we are in some ways potentially giving up our jurisdiction's priority, our county's priority, right? And that is not easy. That is why you come together at a regional table. It does beg the question of whether we would be more successful if we could do that. Now, I'm gonna pause there, and because I think in some ways that especially the last three of those things are related. And again, these are all these things I think that are going to be present this year, that are going to be in board items and board discussion and things outside the board, and your trips back to DC, your trips to the state capitol, the mega region working group. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to flag some of these for all of you as board leaders.
Can I ask you a question, James?
Sure.
As far as the federal funding that you're talking about, where, individual entities can go ask for dollars. Those projects don't necessarily have to be in the SCS, the regional SCS plan, correct? Or do they?
That's a really good question. I think they have to be in our what I would call our short range TIP. Our transportation improvement program is kind of our flavor. I know if you followed, earmarks have come back. So we call them, I think, congressionally directed spending now, but so they're much smaller. They have a new name, but they're back. And I think for those, I'm pretty sure they have to be in the short range TIP. But I do think you're right that you can apply for grants. And I'm looking to see if
we can pull projects in, so they don't, it depends by project, by program, but not all necessarily have to be in the TIP at the time that you're applying, but they will ultimately have to be there because they're federal. But if I can just make an aside on that, I think it's important to note that when they come into the short range TIP, that also means they have to balance out our regional air quality conformity things. So they definitely need to be in our long range plan. And then we also have to consider kind of their regional impact.
So, I mean, it would behoove us to have projects that we advocated together that were in our plan, right? Our long-term plan. Because at the end of the day, we still have to meet certain criteria, especially the air quality ones. I'm just asking, right, because I can see the value. I mean, I see, right, we're going to be individuals running after dollars who want our fair share. And then I see the value of trying to get people and projects where we've got the weight of the region together so we can try to go after those dollars. And maybe there's a way to look at the projects that we have that are coming up that we aren't quite fully funded, or might have a big bang for their buck that we might be able to get the, SACOG behind, or several jurisdictions behind to apply for dollars. Because that's, I mean, we want to support one another, right? Like, we know that we're going to get more money to support one another. The question is, who goes first, right? And how long will this money be around? There's that, right? Couple more years, and then who knows what happens with the next administration, or so. I'm just spitballing here, so somebody feel free to jump in, but.
Well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but at the same time, I definitely see how it would be really challenging. And so it might be a struggle. Because right now, I mean, what's kind of been our current, and I know it's fairly new, but we've had like a couple jurisdictions submit for each of the kind of funding projects. Is that kind of a correct understanding of what's happened to date?
We could probably get you some data on this. It's more than a couple, Director Bradford. I mean, there are definitely applications going in, and some successful, right? Yuba Sutter Transit winning the RAISE grant to build out the new transit facility for Yuba Sutter, right? So that's a great thing. And in some ways, you could have a philosophy. Well, the more applications we put in, we're increasing our chances, right? Just on the pure odds of it. But I can tell you, having been back in DC and visiting with some folks in the administration, the flip side of that is looking uncoordinated, and that we're just throwing stuff at the wall. And again, I'm not pointing the finger back on us that it's just us that have this problem. But I do think if we're going to be successful at pulling down at competing and winning grants, I think we have to be more coordinated. We have to be more strategic. And I think it's a great question for the region as a 6-county region, and for this board and for us, is what would it look like to be more coordinated and strategic?
I guess a follow-up question to Directors Gore and Bradford is there a middle ground? Rather than trying to get us all, wrapped around one project, what would it look like to submit, 3 or 4? I mean, is there value in that? Would Washington look, on a much smaller targeted list the same way they look at a very long list?
Director Thomas, I would just say that's better. The shorter the better, right? So what I hear you saying is, boy, that might be tough for, and I think this is, again, just to be honest, right? It's tough to imagine a project that's not in your county, perhaps, or your jurisdiction, right? And well, wait, we're locking ourselves out of an opportunity to go for something. However, if we could think of, and this is one of the reasons we've been convening some of the agencies around disaster preparedness and climate resilience, if we could come up with a short list that reflects a few, right, some geographic diversity, but a short list of something, and pitch that, and pitch it not as a single project, right, but as a coordinated, cohesive strategy.
Around a theme could be interesting. That's so it's one theme, but 3 different projects perhaps in different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Right, are there projects that span more than one jurisdiction, right? That those projects might be helpful if they have an impact on more than one jurisdiction.
Well, I'm wondering the same thing. I completely get that we need to rally around fewer projects. I think one would be really challenging, but a couple major, I'm just being honest, top of my head, obviously for me, it's always going to be 65 because it impacts us so much, but also, trying to get home on Cap City Freeway from Elk Grove was what made me retire early. So I think if we could have a cohesive plan behind a couple large projects that impact so many, maybe we'd have a better shot.
I would echo those thoughts as well. I think it'd be extremely difficult to get to one project, but I think, a cohesive approach to projects that really have significant regional benefit. The one that comes to my mind that certainly benefits my constituents as well, that's not in my jurisdiction is, Highway 65, and particularly, the I-80 interchange. And, I don't even know if that's one of the projects that would be considered for this kind of opportunity, but that certainly has regional benefit and would impact many things. And so looking at projects like that, I think it would be easier to rally around those.
So James, I just want to be clear. So if we were to come up with whatever number of regional projects, and then each jurisdiction would still submit individual projects in their jurisdiction, do you think that that's the win-win that we need to be going towards, or do you think that that would be conflicting messages?
Well, I think the fewer asks we have, the better. I think it's a tall order to say, I think, to any one of you, you shouldn't go to DC and ask for your project. But I also think the more that we do that, actually, the worse our chances are, right? The more we do that in a way that is not coordinated. So I think it is where you're, perhaps I think what you're saying is, and this, look, we're having a regional conversation, right? This is exactly what we're doing. Is there a sweet spot somewhere? Can we develop something? And back to the second topic on the work plan here, and the challenges, but also the opportunities through the blueprint, through the development of the next long range plan. Can we work collectively as a region to identify, right, falling under a couple of themes or strategies, a short list of those projects? Because one thing I do know, Director Jennings, is if you go back locally for a project that is also of regional significance, and we do that together, and you have a whole, as you might say, team behind you, right, rather than just one jurisdiction, you will be more successful. If we
Right.
can articulate that as part of an overall strategy that benefits all 6 counties or the Northern California mega region, you will be more successful.
Yeah, and I get that. I'm totally understanding of that. I think I'm trying to find that sweet spot where, you know, we take the priority projects that really benefit the region, and those multiple projects that may be in a certain jurisdiction, they take the smaller projects that would benefit their cities. I'm trying to find out, is that the sweet spot? You know, that's not more is regionalism as it is specifically, you know, geographic. And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I would love to go back and look at what they funded in the past and take a look at the last 10 years or 5 years and kind of get an idea of those who did a regionalistic strategy versus a 3-point strategy. Throw as many 3 points up as you can and see if you can win the game.
See, Director Sanders has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sort of wondering about, there's an additional level of consideration here that hasn't really been raised yet, and that is, well, it's been indirectly raised. The projects have varying likelihood of success. So just imagine, I don't know, a dense transit-oriented project versus a highway going out into greenfield development. What do we think the odds are of those 2 projects, you know, going head to head? In this federal environment, now, certainly transit would have a much greater rate of success there. In the former administration, maybe not so much, depending on the economic development impact. So are we going to also look at, you know, if you had just a strict, let's all take our turn and put our project in, we're probably not putting our best foot forward. We're just taking turns putting a foot forward with varying degrees of success.
Yeah, Saragossa, I'd agree with David. I think that's, I was going to bring up something in a different way, but similar, which is exactly that. It's like, what's, you know, where are we going to be competitive? What's on the, certainly transit, pedestrian, cycle, you know, we know those are going to be the more amenable projects, but that might not be what, you know, every jurisdiction is going to be looking for, especially more of our rural districts. So that does beg the question of, if we just take turns, that turn may be for, you know, not a waste of time, but may not rank as high.
Well, you also think if we bring in the economic development portion of it, I mean, I know, you know, Barry Broom and his team get it, that as he's trying to attract businesses, they've got to be able to move their goods. And so hopefully that might be a focus that we could aim for, to stay a huge portion as we're trying to bring diverse economy is we've got to be able to move stuff.
Okay, we're at just over 30 minutes now. Is there any other comments, questions? James, are you getting what you need? I would not want to be in your seat right now because I'm not getting anything.
Oh, no, I not at all, actually. I think and I think there's nothing like this question in particular, right, to sort of put the finer point on how do we compete successfully as a region? Like this is, right, this is where you all come as 28 individual jurisdictions, and we talk about, are we coordinated? Could we be more successful together, right? Where's the synergy? And I believe if we go by default and we all just throw in applications, we will not be successful. And so the question is, where do we find the sweet spot, as you all are saying? And we don't have an answer to this, right? I'm raising the question. We're trying to be transparent about it, as you'll see in the next item. But I would leave, at least for now, the conversation as follows. Number one is, and we've been doing this, we have not had this problem in the last, up until about 2 years ago, when we had the first federal infrastructure bill that actually proliferated federal grant programs, right? So before this, we had like Tiger, and that was like one grant program, maybe New Starts, but that was much more. So this is a new problem. And it's a problem that I think, you know, we need to, as a region and as a collection of jurisdictions and agencies, we need to tackle it. And we need to think about how we're going to be smart and strategic. If your jurisdiction or an agency that you sit on the board of is applying for a federal grant, we have asked this already. I would ask people give us an early heads up that you work with us, that you get your staff to work with us. I think we actually could be very helpful in allowing you to be competitive. Number one. Number two, as I said, we go through the blueprint plan. I think it's a great opportunity for us as a region to begin to define some priorities that are regional priorities, that are sort of the short lists that speak to the contingencies you all have offered. No, I guess I'll leave it at that. I know Director Soon has his hand up as well.
Thanks, James and Patrick. I just wanted to add on, James, to what you were saying. I was wondering perhaps if using the blueprint as a short list, but workshopping it through amongst the 28 board members, if we all are familiar with our respective individual organizations, but collectively, whether it's per county or even a multi-county type of thing, maybe we can come to a more refined short list. And I don't know if there's a limit. Is it 6 projects or 12 projects that we're looking to limit ourselves to? But maybe through workshopping, we can whittle down that list, and that's something that we can all get behind for each, whether county or multiple projects in multiple counties. But I think doing it in a way that we're all at the table and being informed by our respective staff, being informed by the blueprint, being informed by SACOG staff, and of course even the triple bottom line. If considering all those things, I think we can get to some projects in the end, but it'll take time, and I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah, James, so as we know, Sacramento County, submitted like 18 projects this year. That's probably the list you didn't want. But
to the funding round, the SACOG funding.
Yeah. But is there a mechanism that is utilized for a point system type of thing, in which, the more regional a project is, the more points it gets?
Well, I was just going to say that to Director Soon's comments. I mean, I think, and this maybe gets back a little bit to what Director Sander and Saragosa were also raising. So we have a number of tools and evaluation criteria, which now we actually allow project sponsors and to actually go through their own sort of initial rating of things, to look at things like regional benefit.
Right.
And I think that was going to be my response to you, Director Soon, which is, I'm sure we could get 28 of you or 31 of you at the SACOG board meeting to talk about all your projects, and you will have your insights and your knowledge and your passion about all of them, right? But I want to remind us all, we increasingly have to be, as we've talked about in the corrective action, performance driven, and we have to bring some data to this. One, generally speaking, regional benefit would be one. The other in this, and we are to advance, and you mentioned triple bottom line, Director Soon, which I appreciate, but to be competitive, reducing carbon emissions, advancing equity, connecting people to access to jobs and services, right? So I don't want to suggest there's, we're going to throw a bunch of projects on the table and you get to sort of shuffle through all the cards, and that's the best way to do this. I think if we're going to be successful, we're going to have to increasingly show that we actually have true performance benefit from the applications we're putting forward at the federal level, let's just say. And also, by the way, increasingly, this is the last piece of this puzzle for now, is you've already seen this at the state level, but we as an agency are going to be asked now at the state level, I think it's coming at the federal level, to prioritize the projects that go forward. So some of the Senate Bill 1 state funds, we've already been asked to do that. And I think we're going to see more of that. And it is going to be very data informed and data based.
Okay. All right. Any other board members, anything before we move on? Any closing remarks, James?
No, we've got a full plate coming up this year, right? We have a lot of work to undertake. This was a chance to look at, and we didn't really get to the importance of Green Means Go and how much we're gonna need everybody's help here to try to secure additional funding, but also figure out how we can get maybe some non-monetary policy change to look at those green zones and hopefully see that kind of economic development and housing happen. Trails plan, and the final piece on this, just because it's important, I don't want to not mention it, is we have done these regional progress reports every couple of years, the last 5 years. The question being, how well are we implementing our plan? And we talk a lot, and I talked about the blueprint in 2050 and 2035. But we have to be equally vigilant about what should be happening on the ground right now if we're going to be achieving these goals that we say we want. And so we're going to be doing a bit more work at looking at measuring and monitoring and sort of reporting out dashboards, etc. So all to come in the year ahead. I just wanted to give you that opportunity to think a little bit, invite you in to some of the discussions we've been having ourselves as staff.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is information item number 3, Executive Director's Leadership Goals for 2023. And this is James Corliss again.
All right, if you could pull up the, I just got to share my screen here. So just a reminder, and this is in the memo that's attached to this item. In 2022, the board secured Eric Douglas and LRI to basically revamp my executive director performance evaluation process, which had been in place, roughly speaking, for quite some time. And if you remember, that was because we were asking the board to do my evaluation based on a set of data and questions, and they said, well, we want some more information. So part of that revision to my evaluation process, and it's included in your memo, in your packet, is to do more of a 360 and get my managers to weigh in on my evaluation, to revise the questions, have some questions for the board and additional questions for staff. And then finally, at the beginning of each calendar year, or the beginning of the first strategic planning committee, for me to put in front of you all as the strategic planning committee, a set of proposed leadership goals for the year. And the reason we did the first item and then I went right into this is to try to tell you a little bit about, okay, well, that's the work and some of the challenges as we see them, right? Not just what am I going to do, but how am I going to do it? And so at least these are the proposed goals I have. Would love to get any thoughts and feedback from you. And I'm just going to run through them. Number one, engage the board in our work. I believe this since I've arrived at this agency. If you don't not just understand what we're doing, which I know sometimes is very complex and very technical, but actually engage, spend time, understand it, and really advocate for our work, then we will not be effective. So with 8 new board members this year, that's going to be some of where I spend my time, but really for all of you, when we send out those legislative relationship surveys, who do you know? That's really important, right? Because We wouldn't have gotten, frankly, any Green Means Go funding if it wasn't for all of you engaging at the right time with the right people. But even more than that, understanding the blueprint plan, understanding our racial equity work, and really being able to engage in it, communicate it, either advocate for it or debate it at the right time. Those things are all really, really important, number one. Second is, and again, perhaps much of this sort of is obvious or goes without saying, but I thought it was important to articulate these things, really trying to strengthen and deepen relationships with our stakeholders and our partner agencies. Believe it or not, I believe that since I've joined SACOG 5.5 years ago, every city manager and county executive is new. I believe that since 2017, there may be one or two. Point being, especially through COVID and remote work and the pandemic, right? Much maybe how all of you feel in some of your day-to-day. It really is important that we as an agency and I as a leader really make sure that we have good working relationships with our key agencies, cities, counties, transit districts, and now community-based organizations, some of which will be brand new for us as a result of our Racial Equity Action Plan. Number 3, tee up tough regional conversations with transparency and clarity. That was a little bit of what I was trying to do in that last item on the competitive grants. I think we certainly had our share of that last year with Measure A as an example, and we will have it again this year with a number of items, including the blueprint. We are only going to be, I believe, successful as a region if we know how to have really hard discussions and debates, right? And our job as staff and my job as your executive director is to sort of set the table for you, right? That's number 3. 4 is triple bottom line. I appreciate Director Soon mentioning that earlier. I think this is it's like building a muscle, and we have to begin to build a muscle around equity and racial equity, economic prosperity and environment and sustainability and resilience. If those things are going to be real, and we've adopted those as part of our strategic plan, then our job and my job is to basically translate those. What does it look like? How does it show up in your decisions and board policies and board actions, et cetera? 5, which of course is key to underpinning the success of our work, which is building that trust across rural, suburban, and urban differences. Making sure that I and we translate those, understand them and understand the uniqueness of every community and what you bring, but also B, in things like the corrective action in a 6-county funding round that we're going to be developing over the next 2 years. How do we do that so that small communities, rural areas benefit and are get what they need to thrive and to close their own disparities just as much as the urban core. And then finally, and last but not least, is to continue to provide leadership for the staff, support for the development of our staff. You all have mentioned many times what an amazing staff you have, and you do. You really do. We also have a lot of very new staff. So making sure that I do what I need to do and can do to strengthen the development of the staff, the success of the staff culture, the staff engagement. So I'd love to get any feedback on these. Mr. Chair, back to you.
Well, I think you nailed it. Anything from the board?
I would agree as well. And I do appreciate, James, the idea of having us go to other places in the 6-county region for meetings, right? Gives us opportunity to see other jurisdictions as far as building some trust and understanding of the different regions. I really think these are tough goals, but I agree with Chair Kennedy. You hit the mark.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Sorry, Director Zaragoza, go ahead.
No, I was just going to echo the same thing. I think you hit it on his head. And I think, you'd have to have those tough conversations as we go forward and, have that regional conversations. So I think we're on the right path here, and this is a good blueprint.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah. Yeah, the only way we're gonna be able to have those tough regional conversations is to build trust. The only way we build trust is to get to know each other better and what each other is dealing with. So we can, tee up those regional conversations and have a successful outcome.
So let me weigh in real quick. I think you have the right goals in place. I think my question comes into the how-tos, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. I specifically want to kind of talk about what's already been talked about in the number 2 and number 5, building the trust and strengthening relationships. And so, James, when you came to the city council meeting at the end of this year, you were an incredible hit. And I just kind of thought to myself, if that could happen on a regular basis, where you or your staff is in front of the city council, updating us on the work plan and we're updating us on the goals, I just think that builds number 2 and number 5 in a way that really builds, it takes a lot off you individually to have to do it all yourself, but it allows us to really see what's going on in SACOG and how can we become a partner with SACOG. So I just want to kind of let you know, I think you got the right goals, and I just want to encourage you to continue to do what you did when you came and spoke to us at our council meeting.
Yeah, Director Jennings, I appreciate that. And I can tell you, we've had a lot of conversations here when, again, this kind of came from the board last year. Hey, you should all do a roadshow. You should get out there. It was incredibly helpful for us too, right? Actually, to sit through some of your council and board meetings, to hear what's on your agendas, to hear your own challenges, and then, as you say, to be present, right, and to talk about our work, and to, there were some good questions. So I definitely hear you on this one.
Yeah, no, it was impressive, and you are impressive when you are in front, just like we see you impressive as our executive director at SACOG. And it's just the consistency of doing it with some kind of regularity, and each jurisdiction can determine what that regularity is for them. But, for us, I think, if we could do it on once a trimester or once a quarter basis, it really keeps you in front, keeps staff in front, keeps the work in front. So I think you got the right goals. I just want to talk about what you're doing already by us moving out and going to different jurisdictions in order to have our meetings, but also coming to our meetings in order to develop that relationship that you're trying, and trust that you're trying to do.
Well, can I just follow up on that one? Then I'm happy to hand it back to you, Chair Kennedy. If you have either, there's the boards and the councils, right? But I know you also you're on other agencies that might intersect with our work. Green Means Go, for example, racial equity work, for example. If you see opportunities that you think, well, SACOG is actually is a great opportunity for James or a staff person to come explain. I would love those. I'd love to know about those. And it may just that you have something on your board or council agenda that it'd be good to get an update from us. So please look out for those proactively and feed them back to us.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense.
All right, anybody else?
I
Right.
just, if I could, Kenny, just the same thing. I think you coming out and making those connections, and the same with Chair Kennedy coming out, you have a great deal of credibility, and it helps people to see you and hear the face. I think sometimes those of us out in different counties have to remind people that it's not Sacramento necessarily is our region. And so I think building that confidence, especially with the change that we're going through now with PCTPA and El Dorado Hills, there's those concerns. So we've got to be honest about them, address it, talk about it, and see how we work through that. But I think those connections are great, and I love your goals. I think they're right spot on.
I agree 100%. I'll rep. There is no substitute for being there and seeing it. I know that the meetings that I've attended and I'm going to continue until I've hit every jurisdiction, have been tremendously helpful to me. And so, you know, as much as we can do of that, get out of our very nice board meeting room, I think it's extremely valuable and helpful.
And just a thought, as Director Gallardo was mentioning, right, the new challenges of PCTPA and the El Dorado County agency. James, I don't know if you've already done this since I don't serve on PCTPA. Have you had a chance to go to those meetings yet and just meet the directors? I think that would just be really helpful, right? This is me, this is our staff. So they know, and that it's building that relationship, right? Because when people don't know someone, it just, this will just break down those perceived barriers. So just a thought.
A really good idea, Director Gore.
All right. Anybody else? All right, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda, our last agenda item is legal services review of policies and procedures. And I believe our legal counsel, Mike Mauer, is presenting that item.
You're up, Mike.
All right, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So I wasn't going to do a full PowerPoint for this meeting. I'll let you know I did a short PowerPoint for the PI meeting this morning, and then we'll touch on some more things at the board meeting later this month. But there's a couple of things I really wanted to tee up. Is one of the things I'm going to be working on this year and have talked with your executive staff about is reviewing the various policies that SACOG utilizes. So both at the board level, meaning the bylaws, and then other policies like your EEO policy that impacts the board, as well as the administrative policies that are used at the staff level. And I'll just share one slide here real quick. Is my screen up there?
Yep.
Sorry, one of these days I'll get better at Zoom, hopefully. But so this is, you know, I put this up here because this is just the framework that we'll be looking at the policies. And what I'd focus on mostly is the bylaws that govern the board. So this is how we'll be reviewing it from a legal standpoint. We'll be working with the Policy and Innovation Committee to get input, and then also bring it to the Strategic Planning Committee. But what I would really ask for with this committee in particular is, you know, two things. One has to do with, is it a clear document and easy to implement? And I bring that up because this committee is comprised of the leadership at SACOG at the board level and the committee level. So, you know, ideas or thoughts that you have on how they could be more clear, more effective, you know, challenges that you've had with them in the past, it's going to be really good feedback for us and things that we can bring to the Policy and Innovation Committee. And then the last one goes along with a lot of what James has already discussed today, which is looking at whether the policies are consistent with SACOG's mission, vision, and goals. And we're at a point here, you know, part of why I'm looking at these is just because I'm new here and taking a look at what SACOG's done in the past and, you know, seeing what other thoughts I could bring to it. But what I think is even more important is that, as James mentioned, the strategic plan was just approved recently. The racial equity action plan was just approved recently. And, you know, I want to look at things, even things that are fairly straightforward, like our bylaws and things like that. I want to look at them in light of the new strategic plan and our triple bottom line and other agency mission, vision, and goals. And so particularly, we'll be looking at the Policy and Innovation Committee with this as well, but especially with the Strategic Planning Committee, we want to make sure that we're aligning our internal policies with what SACOG has indicated are its external goals. So that's really all I have. This will be something that'll be coming back in the future. We will be working with the PI committee. If you have any feedback or questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we'll be reporting back on this in the future.
All right. Any questions?
I might just say, I think it's a great idea. It's always really helpful, Michael, to have new eyes on, right? When we've been doing something the same way for a long time and you have new people come in, and we've got a whole host of new board members this year as well as 2 years ago. So most of us are new, like within the last 4 to 5 years. And so having you come in and having this new eyes on, I think is really helpful. So thank you for the effort. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
I will also say that for those of you who were not present during the interviews for our general counsel, that BBK really hit this one out of the ballpark, so I think that there is definitely an understanding of the need and of our culture as an organization. So
Thank you.
anyone else? All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Thank you, everybody. James, you have anything to wrap up, or you good?
We're good. Just a reminder, these are quarterly, so the next one is in May. They always follow the Policy and Innovation Committee meetings. We will kick off my performance evaluation in that session and give you a couple of other agenda items as well we're working on.
Okay. I do think that the performance evaluation last time was a great process, by the way. So I would strongly suggest not wavering too far from that.
Oh, we're keeping it. Don't worry.
Okay. All right.
A lot of time going into revamping it. We're going to keep it for a while.
Okay, good. All right.
do
Thank you,
think-
everybody.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Director Chairman, I do think we should keep this, the quote unquote tough talk for regionalism on the list for strategic planning for the next meeting, just to kind of check in to see where we're at and, what ideas we've gone through and where we can go going forward. So I think it's important to keep that as a discussion item.
Good comment. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.